The Asha Degree Mystery. A true crime investigation. The perfect child. On the surface, 9-year-old Asha Degree lived the kind of childhood that parents dream of providing. In the small, tight-knit community of Shelby, North Carolina, the Degree family was known for their strong values, protective nature, and unwavering devotion to their children. Harold and Aquila Degree had built a life centered around family, faith, and hard work. Their home on Oakcrest Street was modest but filled with love, laughter, and the kind of structure that creates secure, confident children. Asha was everything a parent could hope for in a daughter. She was responsible beyond her years, never requiring reminders to complete her homework or chores. Her teachers at Falston Elementary consistently praised her academic performance and gentle demeanor. She was the child who helped other students with their assignments, who never forgot to feed the class pet, who always remembered to say please and thank you. Her friends knew her as sweet and dependable, someone who kept promises and shared her snacks without being asked. But Asha wasn't just academically gifted, she was an athlete. Basketball consumed much of her free time, and she approached the sport with the same dedication she brought to everything else. Practice after practice, she pushed herself to improve, driven by an internal motivation that impressed her coaches. She dreamed of playing in high school, maybe even college someday. Her parents supported every game, every practice, beaming with pride as they watched their daughter pursue her passion. The Degree household operated on routine and structure. Bedtimes were strictly enforced, not out of harshness, but out of love and the understanding that children thrive with boundaries. Asha shared a bedroom with her 10-year-old brother O'Brien, and the two had developed the comfortable rhythm that siblings often share. They'd whisper quietly after lights out sometimes, sharing small secrets and observations about their day, but they respected their parents' rules. Sunday, February 13, 2000, began like countless other Sundays in the Degree home. The family attended church together, spent the afternoon relaxing, and prepared for the week ahead. Asha had homework to complete, and she tackled it with her usual diligence. That evening, she and O'Brien were sent to bed at their normal time. Harold and Aquila checked on them, as they did every night, ensuring their children were safe and sound before settling in for their own evening routine. The last person to see Asha was her brother. They had talked quietly for a few minutes after their parents tucked them in, typical sibling chatter about school and friends. O'Brien would later remember that Asha seemed completely normal, no signs of distress, no unusual behavior, nothing that would suggest the unimaginable was about to happen. At some point during the night, as her family slept peacefully in their beds, trusting that their home was a sanctuary, 9-year-old Asha Degree made a decision that would baffle investigators for decades to come. She quietly gathered a few belongings, slipped out of the house she had never left alone before, and walked into the darkness of a cold February night. What happened next would transform the Degree family's world forever, launching one of North Carolina's most perplexing missing person cases. A case where dedicated investigators would follow every lead, interview hundreds of people, and still find themselves no closer to understanding why a sheltered, obedient child would venture into the night alone. What could possibly motivate a 9-year-old girl to leave the safety of her home in the middle of the night? Into the storm. February 14, 2000, dawned gray and cold in Shelby, North Carolina. Harold Degree woke before sunrise, as he did every weekday morning, preparing for another day at his job with the Shelby Police Department. As a detective, Harold understood the importance of routine, of checking details, of ensuring everything was as it should be. That morning, he followed his usual pattern: shower, coffee, a quick check on the kids before heading out. But when Harold pushed open the bedroom door that Asha shared with O'Brien, his world tilted off its axis. O'Brien was there, still sleeping peacefully in his bed. Asha's bed was empty. The covers were pulled back as if she had simply gotten up, but she was nowhere to be found. Harold's detective instincts kicked in immediately, even as panic began to rise in his chest. He called for Aquila, and together they searched every room, every closet, every possible hiding spot in their home. The basement, the attic, behind furniture, they looked everywhere a small child might curl up. But Asha was simply gone. The front door was unlocked. In a household where security was paramount, where doors were always secured before bed, this detail sent chills through both parents. Harold's trained eye immediately began cataloging what was missing. Asha's winter coat was gone from the closet. Some of her clothes were missing from her dresser. A backpack was missing from her room. Aquila's hands shook as she dialed 911, her voice breaking as she tried to explain the impossible situation to the dispatcher. Her baby girl, her responsible, obedient 9-year-old daughter, was missing. The child who had never so much as walked to the corner store alone was gone. The Cleveland County Sheriff's Office responded immediately, but even as they began their investigation, everyone involved understood they were dealing with something unprecedented. Children Asha's age don't simply vanish from secure homes in the middle of the night. There had to be an explanation, but what could it possibly be? As officers began canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing neighbors, and processing the scene, a picture began to emerge that made the mystery even more confounding. The weather that night had been terrible, cold, windy, with intermittent rain. The temperature had dropped into the 30s, with a steady wind that would have made the air feel even colder. It was the kind of night when adults hurried from their cars to their front doors, when staying inside seemed like the only sensible choice. Yet somehow, Asha had ventured out into this hostile environment, apparently of her own free will. She had taken the time to gather belongings, to dress warmly, to pack a bag. This wasn't a spontaneous decision, it appeared to be planned. The first major break in the investigation came around 4 a.m., approximately 6 hours after Asha had been discovered missing. A truck driver traveling north on Highway 18, about a mile and a half from the Degree home, called authorities with information that made everyone's blood run cold. He had seen a small figure walking along the dark highway in the early morning hours. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. What child would be out in such weather, in such a dangerous location? But as his headlights illuminated the figure, he was certain it was a young African-American girl, walking alone on the shoulder of the highway. The trucker had tried to stop, concerned for the child's safety, but when he pulled over and called out, the figure had quickly left the roadway and disappeared into the woods. His description matched Asha perfectly: small, wearing dark clothing, carrying what appeared to be a backpack. This sighting was soon corroborated by another motorist who had seen the same figure around the same time, in the same area. Two independent witnesses, both describing a child matching Asha's description, walking alone on a dangerous highway in the middle of a cold, stormy night. The search intensified immediately. K-9 units, helicopters, hundreds of volunteers, everyone who could help descended on the rural areas surrounding Highway 18. They searched the woods, abandoned buildings, creek beds, anywhere a frightened child might seek shelter. But despite the massive effort, despite the use of every available resource, they found nothing. As the hours stretched into days, a devastating realization began to settle over everyone involved in the search. Asha hadn't been abducted from her home. She had left voluntarily, walking out into one of the worst nights of the winter, heading towards something or someone that had motivated her to leave behind everything safe and familiar in her life. But what could possibly drive a sheltered 9-year-old to make such a dangerous journey? And where was she now? Clues in the darkness. As the investigation into Asha Degree's disappearance deepened, detectives found themselves confronting a puzzle that seemed to defy all logic. Every piece of evidence they uncovered only made the mystery more impenetrable. This wasn't a case where the obvious answer was hiding in plain sight. This was something entirely different, something that challenged everything investigators thought they knew about missing children cases. The search of the woods along Highway 18 continued for days, with hundreds of volunteers combing through every possible hiding spot. On February 17, 3 days after Asha vanished, searchers made a discovery that provided both hope and heartbreak. Hidden in a shed on property about a mile from where she had been sighted, they found several items that belonged to Asha. The items were carefully placed, not scattered as if dropped in panic or struggle. There was a pencil, a marker, and a bow from her hair, small, personal belongings that meant everything to her parents and nothing to anyone else. The fact that these items were found in the shed suggested that Asha had sought shelter there, had perhaps spent time in that space. But she was gone now, and there were no additional clues about where she might have headed next. Investigators processed every inch of that shed, looking for fingerprints, DNA, any trace evidence that might reveal who else had been there or where Asha had gone next. The shed belonged to a family who had been thoroughly investigated and cleared of any connection to Asha's disappearance. They had been out of town the weekend she vanished, and their property had simply provided an unfortunate hiding spot for a frightened child. As the weeks turned into months, detectives began building a timeline of Asha's last known day, searching for any clue that might explain her motivation for leaving home. They interviewed her classmates, her teachers, her basketball teammates, anyone who had interacted with her in the days before she disappeared. What emerged was a consistent picture of a happy, well-adjusted child with no apparent problems or fears. There had been a basketball game the Friday before she vanished, a game her team had lost. Some investigators initially wondered if disappointment over the loss might have contributed to her decision to leave, but those who knew Asha well dismissed this theory. She was competitive, yes, but she was also mature for her age and understood that losing was part of sports. Her parents and coaches confirmed that she had seemed fine after the game, perhaps a little disappointed but not devastated. The investigation revealed that Asha had taken several specific items with her when she left home. In addition to clothes and her backpack, she had packed a photograph of herself from a recent school event. This detail seemed significant to investigators. The photograph suggested she might have been planning to show it to someone, perhaps to prove her identity or to share a memory. One of the most puzzling aspects of the case was the question of planning. The evidence suggested that Asha's departure wasn't impulsive. She had taken time to pack, to gather specific belongings, to dress appropriately for the weather. But if she had been planning to leave, why hadn't she told anyone? And more importantly, where had she been planning to go? Investigators conducted extensive interviews with family members, trying to understand if there had been any recent changes in Asha's behavior or routine. They spoke with extended family friends, church members, anyone who might have had contact with her in the weeks before she disappeared. The picture that emerged was frustratingly consistent. Asha had been her normal, happy self right up until the night she vanished. The possibility of internet contact was explored thoroughly, despite the fact that the Degree family didn't have internet access at home. Investigators checked computers at the school, the library, anywhere Asha might have had online access. They found no evidence of inappropriate contact or communication with strangers. As the first anniversary of Asha's disappearance approached, investigators were no closer to understanding her motivation for leaving home. They had followed hundreds of leads, interviewed countless people, and searched thousands of acres of land. The FBI had joined the investigation, bringing additional resources and expertise. But despite all their efforts, Asha Degree remained missing, and the reason for her disappearance remained a complete mystery. Then, in August 2001, more than a year after Asha vanished, construction workers made a discovery that would reignite the investigation and provide the first new clue in months. While preparing to build in a rural area about 26 miles from Asha's home, they unearthed a backpack buried in the woods. Inside that backpack were items that belonged to Asha Degree. The discovery sent shockwaves through the investigation and provided the first concrete evidence of where Asha had been after she was last seen alive. But it also raised more questions than it answered, and brought investigators face to face with the most disturbing possibility of all. What had happened to Asha in the months between her disappearance and the burial of her belongings? A family's endless wait. The discovery of Asha's backpack buried 26 miles from her home marked a devastating turning point in the investigation. For Harold and Aquila Degree, who had clung to hope that their daughter might still be alive, might still come home, the buried belongings suggested something far more sinister than a lost child seeking adventure. The backpack had been carefully wrapped in plastic bags before being buried, indicating that whoever placed it there had taken deliberate steps to preserve it. Inside, investigators found several items that belonged to Asha, including clothing and a photograph. The condition of the items and the method of burial suggested that someone had kept them for a period of time before deciding to dispose of them. This discovery shifted the investigation's focus entirely. What had begun as a missing person case was now being treated as a likely homicide. The FBI increased their involvement, and the reward for information leading to Asha's whereabouts grew to $45,000. But despite renewed media attention and intensified investigative efforts, the case remained frustratingly unsolved. For the Degree family, each passing year brought a mixture of hope and heartbreak. They never stopped believing that Asha might still be alive, that she might still come home. Harold and Aquila became advocates for missing children, working with other families who faced similar tragedies, turning their pain into purpose while never giving up on finding their daughter. The investigation continued, with detectives following up on thousands of tips and leads over the years. They investigated registered sex offenders in the area, examined similar cases across the country, and pursued every possible connection or theory. Advanced DNA techniques were applied to evidence as technology improved. Age progression photos were created and distributed, showing what Asha might look like as she grew older. In 2016, the FBI announced that they were taking a fresh look at the case with new investigators and updated technology. They re-interviewed witnesses, re-examined evidence, and pursued new leads. But despite these efforts, the core mystery remained: why did Asha leave her home that night, and what happened to her after she disappeared into those dark woods? The case has generated numerous theories over the years. Some investigators believe Asha may have been lured out by someone she trusted, perhaps someone who had groomed her over time and convinced her to meet them. Others theorize that she may have been running towards something, perhaps a surprise for her parents or a secret plan that went tragically wrong. One of the most heartbreaking aspects of the case is how it has affected Asha's brother O'Brien, who has lived with the knowledge that he was the last family member to see her alive. He has grown up carrying that weight, wondering if there was something he should have noticed, something he could have done to prevent her from leaving. The tight-knit community of Shelby has never forgotten Asha Degree. Her disappearance changed the town, making parents more vigilant, children more cautious. Annual events are held to remember her and keep her case in the public eye. Billboards with her photograph and case information dot highways throughout North Carolina. Today, more than 2 decades after that cold February night, the investigation into Asha Degree's disappearance remains active. The Cleveland County Sheriff's Office continues to follow up on tips and leads, still hoping for the breakthrough that will finally provide answers. Harold and Aquila Degree, now grandparents, continue their search for their daughter, their faith unbroken despite the passage of time. The case represents one of the most baffling child disappearances in modern American history. Despite thousands of investigative hours, hundreds of interviews, and extensive searches, law enforcement has been unable to determine what motivated a 9-year-old girl to leave her safe home in the middle of a stormy night, or what happened to her after she walked into those dark woods. Asha's case reminds us that sometimes, despite the best efforts of dedicated investigators, despite advanced technology and unlimited resources, some mysteries remain unsolved. Her disappearance continues to haunt everyone who has worked on the case, everyone who has heard her story, everyone who imagines a frightened little girl walking alone into the darkness. For Harold and Aquila Degree, the search continues. They believe their daughter is still out there somewhere, and they refuse to give up hope. They know that someone, somewhere, has the answers they desperately need. They know that Asha's story isn't over, that somewhere in the silence, the truth is waiting to be discovered. Thank you for following Asha Degree's story to the end. If this case moved you, hit like and subscribe. We have more stories that deserve to be heard. Share your thoughts, your feelings, and your final theory in the comments. And remember, if you have any information about Asha's disappearance, no matter how small it might seem, please contact the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. After more than 20 years, her family is still waiting for her to come home.